Ranking YouTuber podcasts. Let's get straight into it. No BS. So here is the list of podcasts. I made it myself, so you know, you're welcome. I'm not gonna do it in order. I'm just gonna pick out of the pile. So first one, we'll start with the Really Good Podcast by Bobby Altoff. This one came out of nowhere. This just happened like a month ago, where she's just everywhere now. And then the Drake thing happened, where she's beefing with Drake for some reason. But this is like a skit podcast. She's not an actual person. She's playing a character. But I think the character's pretty funny. I wouldn't say it's the best. It's good, but it's not A tier. I'd give it B because it's fun to listen to. But like, I'm not like the best podcast I've ever made. It's just good, so I'm gonna give it a B. I don't know why I put Joe Rogan in here because he's not really a YouTuber, but I mean, Joe Rogan is good with a good guest. With a bad guest, he's just boring.
And finally in his life, he's become special after years of neglect.
I got molested.
Did you?
Yes.
The fuck out.
Yep.
That's pretty legit. Incredible.
So I'd probably put him in C tier because he is not the entertainer. The other person that he brings on is the entertainer. So I watch a few episodes a year when I'm interested, like the Mr. Breast episode. I watched that. It was pretty good. Brain Leak. Now I didn't know about this until recently, but this is Jacksepticeye and what's his name? It's their new podcast, and I watched their latest episode, and bro, the editing is terrible. It was just a black screen for like 10 seconds for some weird reason. The audio sounds a bit off in some episodes. He's Irish like me, so I can't go too hard on him, but like, get your production value up there, buddy. You're like worth 20 million at this stage. I don't understand why the production value is so low, so I'm gonna have to give it a C. It's watchable, but it seems to be on like a really strict budget, and the sponsors are so unbelievably weird. Yeah, their sponsors are like weird products that no one's ever heard of. It's very, very odd for Jacksepticeye, but you do you, brother. You do you. We'll do TMG next. I really, really like the TMG podcast, Tiny Meat Gang. Cody and Noel, they're very funny. They've been doing it for like 6 years at this stage, but I wouldn't call it S tier. It's every week, and sometimes they have like off weeks where it's just like, this episode is terrible. But for the most part, they're pretty decent, good episodes that are extremely consistent. They don't miss a week ever. So I'm gonna have to give it an A tier because I tune in every week. The Sleep Deprived Podcast, this is the one that Jay Schlatt recently left, and I used to listen to it sometimes, but now that Jay Schlatt left, I don't listen to it anymore. I'm sorry, I don't know who the other people are, and I don't care. So I'm gonna have to give it a C because it's not F, but it's not the same without Schlatt. It's just I'm not entertained. Sorry. Impulsive. Now I have a strong opinion on this one. Logan Paul is disgraceful. I hate the man with a passion. He is horrible. He's a scammer, and he's very, very odd in my opinion. But he does get some banging guests. He had Bear Grylls on the other week. I watched that. He has like S tier guests, and no one can deny that. I hate him. I hate Mr. Mike Maljic, whatever it is. I think they're both a bit odd, and I think they're a bit scummy. But if I'm putting my biases aside, I mean, it's not that bad. It's really not that bad. Give it a C. I'm giving a lot of these a C. It's just how I feel. Flagrant. Flagrant. The people on Flagrant are funny. I don't really care about them, but they crack some good jokes. The main part of Flagrant is the guests that they got on. They got on really high tier guests. They had Logan Paul on the other week, and they kind of sucked them off a little bit, which I didn't like. I'll give it a B because the guests are good and they're pretty funny. Next, we move on to the Misfits Podcast. RIP. They don't upload anymore. If you don't know the Misfits, they're basically just gaming YouTubers that don't really care about the game. They just make jokes. They're very, very funny. With that being said, their podcast wasn't there. Especially in COVID, they had a deal with Spotify that they had to have a podcast out every week, and during COVID, they had absolutely nothing to talk about. So they just made up fake scenarios that just didn't make sense. So every episode, they just sit down and make up fake scenarios for an hour, and it was really, really boring. And then after the Spotify deal ended, they bailed, and they've barely uploaded on the channel since. So I'll give it a low C. I'm giving most of these a C. I'm giving loads of these a C because I'm keeping the good ones for last. Taste Buds. This isn't technically a YouTuber podcast. It's the guy from Impractical Jokers, Sal Volcano. One sec. Yeah, it's this guy from Impractical Jokers. It's him with like a comedian that I don't think anyone really knows. but they argue about different foods each week, and I love food, so it's pretty entertaining to me for some reason. So I'm giving it an A tier because it's really entertaining. It's like a debate podcast about food, and I mean, who doesn't love food? Well, especially me. The Some Ordinary Podcast is Some Ordinary Gamers podcast, obviously, and he hosts it with Oompaville and Nux. I really like Oompaville, but I don't know Nux. He's like a VTuber. But they get insane guests. I literally had every guest possible on. It's insane. Their guests are like every YouTuber ever. They get mad guests. It's been going on for like 2 years, and it's pretty entertaining. The guests are insane. So yeah, I just tune in when I'm interested in a guest. So I'll give it. Let's see. The One Show with Linus Tech Tips. He got into some controversy recently, but I'm gonna set that aside. I'm gonna put that beside Sal, and I'm gonna just think about it in a podcast. It doesn't matter what he did in his personal life. It's just basically a technology podcast. It's pretty standard. If you're into technology, they just talk about all the new news topics that involve technology. So if you're into that, which I kind of am, it's pretty good, but it's like 4 hours long. It's once a week, and it's just pretty boring, to be honest. I'm gonna put it on a low C. Next we have the H3 Podcast. This man is insane. The H3 Podcast is on every day of the week. That's an insane output. That's 5 podcasts a week, 3 hours long. That's like 13 hours content a week. It's a comedy podcast where they do reactions, they talk about news. They milked Collie and Ballinger dry. It's nice to have a podcast that's so unbelievably consistent that you can just put on it in the background every day. Because most podcasts are like once a week. It's like, oh, I have to wait till next week. But no, with that, it's like I'm waiting until tomorrow. I'm feasting again tomorrow, which is a really good aspect, which no podcast really does. It's like more of a radio thing to be on every day. With that being said, I'd probably put it at a high A because of that reason. It's just so good. The consistency is mad. Unrivaled in the YouTube podcast space. Next we have Stretch and Fade. This is another tiny Meat Gang podcast, TMG, but it's Noel and Meat Canyon on this. The comedy and talent of Meat Canyon is so underestimated. People know him for his animations, but he's very funny. Extremely good in my opinion. It's bi-weekly, so you only get 2 a month, which is kind of meh. But when they come out, the world goes quiet because everyone just be watching. They don't get a lot of views. At all. But in my mind, it's an A tier podcast because I love Me Canyon so much. Right, we're left with 2 of the goats of podcasting, Chuckle Sandwich and Cold Ones. Chuckle Sandwich, Ted Navision and Jay Schlatt. They're both top tier YouTubers. Some of the best content on the platform, in my opinion. The podcast, bringing 2 of them together, is just magnificent. It's probably my favorite podcast on the platform because I just think they're so entertaining and funny. It's my personal opinion that they're entertaining and funny. I realize that not everyone's gonna think this is amazing, but for me it's so good. They don't do much on it. They have some guests sometimes they don't. They just talk about different topics, and I love it. I eat it up. They're very inconsistent recently though, which is very annoying for me because I do be waiting. But with that being said, S tier. But I do realise that most people aren't going to give that an S tier. It's just me. So, and the last one, Cold Ones. Now, Cold Ones is a weird one because most of the time it's not a podcast, and Chad even gets annoyed when it's called a podcast because it's technically a talk show, which does align with it more. They focus more on videos. It started as a podcast, but now they focus more on videos. But every 3 months they will still have a guest, and they just get belligerently drunk with them and say the most heinous stuff possible. They also leaked Ludwig's balls, which I'm a big fan of. Love to see that. And their podcast is just elite in general. It's not as good as Chuckle Sandwich in my personal opinion, but it's definitely up there in S tier. And now that I look at the list, I'm gonna put Impulsive in F tier. I'm pretty sure I missed a few. Leave in the comments if you have any other podcasts. Oh, I forgot The Yard. Oh well.